Hello everyone. So today we are going to discuss the chapter demand and supply. Let's just start with the theory of demand. Demand refers to the ability and the willingness of customers to pay a given price to buy a good or service. Now, demand can be effective if it has the ability of willingness and its ability for customers to pay the given price to buy that good or service. If they are unable to pay because they are unwilling or unable to, so then the demand will be called as ineffective. It will not be it will not be effective. uh, Also, the amount of a good or service demanded at each price level is called the quantity demanded, which means at any given price, the amount that a customer is willing and able to pay is called the quantity demanded. So the theory of demand says that, or the law of demand, in other words, is says that when you increase the price of a product, so its quantity demanded will decrease. So there is an inverse relation between the price and the quantity demanded for any good or any service. Now let's come to the demand curve. Demand curve shows that at various prices like P1 and P2 as shown over here, what will be the quantity demanded. So you can see that if we plot the demand curve, it will be a negative slope demand curve, because there is an inverse relation between quantity and price. So when you decrease the price, the quantity demanded will increase. If you increase the price from P2 to P1, the quantity demanded will fall from Q2 to Q1. So this is the demand curve where on the horizontal axis we have the quantity demanded, and on the vertical axis we will say price. Now, what is the market demand curve? Market demand curves is derived when you add or summulate all the individual demand for a product. So, for example, over here we can see that there was a good which the male customers demanded 500 quantity at $10, and female customer demanded 400 at $10. So we can say that total market was of 900 at $10. So this will be your market demand curve. Now let's come towards the movement and shift in the demand curve. So demand, there can be, like the PPC curve, there can be an upward shift or a downward shift in the demand curve. An increase in demand is represented by a rightward shift of the demand curve, as shown in the graph over here. From D1 to D3, there is an upward shift or a rightward shift in the demand curve, which we call the increase in the demand curve. Now, what causes the increase in the demand curve? So there can be various factors for which the demand of the product might increase. Advertising, there is an extensive advertising for the product, so which led to an increase in demand for and it led to an outward shift in its demand curve. Now, if we come towards the demand curve, so if you decrease the price from P1 to P2, and the quantity demanded will increase from Q1 to Q2, so there is a movement inside the demand curve. However, over there we can see that there is no movement, but there is a complete shift in the demand curve. So that's the difference between the movement of the demand curve and the shift of the demand curve. Now, a decrease in demand can similarly will lead to a downward shift or a leftward shift in the demand curve. Here it is denoted by, from D1 to D2, there is a leftward shift in the demand curve. So we can see that at the same quantity level, the customer will now demand less. At the same price level, the customer will demand less goods. Now, determinants of demand. So there are 5 determinants provided over here, which are income, substitutes, complements, advertising, habits, fashion, and tastes, and government policies. Income, for example, for a normal good, when the income rises, so the demand for a normal good will rise. And when the income rises, the demand for an inferior good will fall. Why? Because inferior goods are those goods which are of low quality, and they are not made for, when you have increased income, you will not purchase those inferior goods. For example, if there is a poor quality rice, so you will not buy a poor quality rice when your income will increase. However, if your income decreased, so the demand for inferior good will rise. So for example, if your income decreased, so you might have to buy a poor quality rice. So this means that inferior goods have a opposite relation or inverse relation with the income, whereas with the other all the goods which are not inferior are basically the normal goods. So normal goods have a direct relation with the with the income. Now substitutes and complements. So this is a very interesting concept. So if the price of a substitute good will fall, so the demand of our product will fall. So if the price of the substitute will increase, so demand of our product will increase. Why? Because when the price of a substitute will increase, so people will come towards your product which you are selling. On the other hand, if the price of the substitute will fall, so people will go away from your product and will go to buy the substitute product. So there is a direct relation between the price of substitute goods and the demand of your own good. Complements are those which are jointly in demand. For example, petrol and car, pencil and rubber. So these are the complementary good. We can also call them A plus B. So what happens if the demand of a complement good will rise? If so, for example, if the price of the complementary good will rise, so the demand of our product will fall. So a simple example is that if the price of petrol will rises, so the demand for cars will fall. So there is an inverse relation between the price and the demand of the complementary goods. Now, advertising is another very interesting factor. Extensive marketing and advertising lead to an increase in the demand for the product. Habit, fashion and taste. This shows that these are those things which are continually changing, and people fashion, taste and habits tends to change over time. So the demand for such products might increase or decrease depending on the taste and fashions. Now, government policies, the disposable income, which is the income of debt after the taxes have been paid. So the amount you get as a net is called your disposable income. So the higher your disposable income is, the more likely you are to have a more effective demand. Now, supply. Now let's come towards the theory of supply. Supply is what the supplier or the firm is willing to sell at the given particular price. So now you can see that supply has a positive relation with the price and the quantity supplied by, because when the price of the product will of a good or service will increase, the quantity supply will increase, because when the price will increase, the supplier have a incentive to have more profit. So they will go towards the revenue maximization. So when your price will increase, the supplier will want to increase the revenue, so they will increase the quantity supplied. So that is the law of supply, which states a positive relation between price and the quantity supplied. Now, if we come towards the market supply, so as similar to the demand, market demand, the market supply is also when you add the overall supply of the different firms and you simulate them to get the total supply of the industry, which will be your market supply. So here there are two firms, Airbus and Boeing. When you add their supply, that is 300 and 320, so you will get the total supply, that will be your market supply. Now there can be an increase, like in the demand curve there can be a movement inside the supply curve. So if the price of the good will increase, so the supplier will expand their supply. On the other hand, if the price of the good will fall, the supplier will contract their supply, as I mentioned earlier, due to the incentive of making revenue maximization policy and also to maximize their profit. Now let's come towards the shifts in the supply curve. So as similar to the demand curve, there can be a shift in the supply curve as well, whether it can be a rightward shift or a leftward shift. Whenever there will be an increase in the supply curve, there will be a rightward shift, and when there will be a decrease in the supply curve, there will be a inward shift or a leftward shift. So there can be several factors. So for example, if the cost of production for suppliers decreases, so they will increase their supply. That will lead to a outward shift, that is from S1 to S2. On the other hand, if the cost of production will increase, the suppliers will reduce their supply, so their supply will fall from S1 to S3. So there will be an inward shift in the supply curve. Now, the determinants of supply. Now, cost of production, taxes, subsidies, technological progress, profitability, time, and weather. Cost of production, as I already mentioned earlier. So when the cost of production will fall, the supply will rise. Taxes. Now let's come towards the taxes. So when there will be an increase in the indirect taxes, this will increase the cost of the firms and decrease their profitability. So increase in taxes will lead to a in the supply curve. So it will be a leftward shift in the supply curve. Subsidies are when government give financial assistance to the firms. So when subsidies will be provided, this will lead to an outward shift in the supply curve. Again, now the technological progress, this will also increase the supply curve. Why? Because technological progress tend to increase the efficiency and reduce the cost of production. Now, price and profitability of other products. So remember, we discussed that the producer will produce only those goods which are more profitable. So if the producer is producing a good which is not profitable and they go towards any other product, selling any other product, so this will lead to a decrease in the supply of their existing product. Why? They will go switch their production to any profitable good or service. Now we have the time factor. So for many goods, it is not possible to increase the supply in a limited time span. So for example, farmers cannot rise the production of apples in a 2 weeks time or a 1 month time. So this will mean that the suppliers cannot increase the quantity because of the time lapse. Weather. Now agriculture products are mostly affected by this factor, weather. So when there are poor weather conditions, this will affect the production of the crops, which will lead to adverse supply, which will adversely affect the supply of the goods. So these are the factors which determines the supply. Now let's come towards the market equilibrium, which is also known as the market clearing price. So if we make the supply and demand curve on a single graph, so the point where the supply and demand meet is known as the equilibrium price or the market clearing price. So this is theoretically, it is also known as the efficient market where the demand and supply interact. This is known as the efficient point. Now, here there is neither excess supply or excess demand. Now, it is also possible that due to several factors that due to all the determinants which we studied earlier, there can be a shift in the supply curve or the demand curve due to due to the determinants which we discussed. So, for example, here we can see that there is an inward shift in the supply curve, which led to an increase in the price of the good and reduce the quantity demanded, because earlier S1 and D intersecting at here over here, and now due to a decrease in the supply curve we can see that the led to an inward shift in the supply curve which reduced the quantity traded from Q1 to Q2, and now this is the new equilibrium. So now that is why the supply of the product reduced, which led to an tax per unit of P1 P2. So this P1 P2, the distance of P1 P2 is your tax per unit. So in contrast, if there are any conditions which lead to an outward shift in the supply curve, so this will increase the quantity demanded and also reduce the price of the product. There can be situation in which the price of a product might be above the equilibrium or below the equilibrium. So if, for example, the price of the product is above the equilibrium, that is P1, we can see that the quantity demanded over here is QD and the quantity supplied is QS. However, since they are not intersecting, so there is a gap between the supply and the demand, which is leading to an excess supply, because at such high price, that is P1, there is higher supply and lesser demand. So quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded, hence there is an excess supply. So this green area shows the excess supply. On the other end, if the price of the commodity is below the market equilibrium, there will be an excess demand, which will be opposite of this, which can be this area. This area will show the excess demand, where there will be higher demand and lesser quantity supplied. So whenever the quantity demand will be greater than the quantity supplied, this will lead to excess demand. So it is very clearly mentioned over here as well. You can read it over here. Now these are some questions. You might take screenshots of them and you can solve them and answer them in the comment section.